If you do all of those things, I think you can be whoever the fuck you want to be in like
Yep.
18 months.
Hey guys, welcome back to Be the Standard. I'm your host, Denny Jamazzo, and I'm here today with a very special guest. His name is Aaron Yeargan. Aaron is a Marine Corps veteran, former law enforcement police officer, and yeah, man, I'm excited to have you on. We've been connected on social media now. I think since pretty much since we got started with Be the Standard. I think you were probably one of our first followers. I think that T-shirt you're
Yeah,
wearing.
man.
That T-shirt you're wearing, I think, was
That's right.
maybe the second one that I sold. You got on there quick, and when you reached out to kind of share your story and share your experiences, man, I was excited because you've been one of our day one guys, and anything I can do to help you kind of push your story out there and kind of give a little back is kind of what we're about. So excited to have you, man. Excited to have this conversation.
Brother, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity more than you'll ever know, man.
Yeah, man, for sure, for sure. One of the things you shared with me was your a little bit about your childhood and growing up. Maybe not with all the resources, maybe not with all of you know, the love in the household and all of that. So I'd like to kind of start there and maybe talk to me a little bit about, your story and your upbringing.
Yeah, man. There was plenty of love. I always say when you're poor and you're loved, you don't realize how poor you are. But no, I also say that I was born straight whiskey tango from the trailer park. I was poor white trash. I tell everybody that. But my parents were high school sweethearts. My mom got pregnant at a young age in high school when she was 17. I was not I was not in the plan. Um, my dad, at that time, 17, 18 years old, he was in and out of the picture. He had some substance abuse issues. I want to preface that by saying that me and my pops are like this now. Um, he's back in my life and everything is fine. But early, yeah, it was just me and my mom, man. It was me and my mom. She's a single mom. Uh, I remember she told me a story one time that because she was a really good basketball player in high school. She gets pregnant, and she had some friends that advised her to have an abortion.
Mm.
And I know that's a controversial topic, but she chose not to, and I'm forever grateful. Um, but yeah, we did. There was a few times there where we met I guess you could say we met the federal definition of homelessness. Living couch surfing a lot, living with friends and relatives. But I tell you what, man, my mom's my hero. She grinded it out. She just recently retired uh, after 40 plus years with Lazy Boy. They make
Yeah.
the furniture company. Yeah, man. She's doing great. My dad's good to go now, but it was a rough go. It was a rough go probably until I was a teenager. Both my dad got everything together that he needed to. Uh, him and my stepmom got together. My mom and stepdad, basically both of my parents remarried to wonderful humans that they're still married to today. Uh, but up until about my teenage years, man, it was it was touch and go.
Yeah, man. And obviously I can relate. And one of the things you said there that I really liked was, you know, we we didn't realize how poor we were because there was some love, right? And I
Hmm.
can remember as a kid, like not really thinking I was poor until I went to school and, other kids kind of told me, that I was poor and
Yeah,
made me
man.
feel a little bit different about how I looked and dressed and things of that nature. So it was cool to hear you say that. But um, it's also cool that, you have a relationship with your father now and that he kind of got his shit together. And you mentioned that he had some substance abuse issues. And, I know you struggled with that a little bit as well. And we'll get into that shortly. But the next thing I want to kind of discuss is, I know you're a Marine Corps veteran and, your career was filled with a lot of ups and downs. And so I'd like to kind of hear a little bit about, your time in the Marines, why you decided to join and what prompted in that decision. And tell me a little bit about your story as it relates to, your service.
Sure. joined the Marine Corps, I just knew that I wanted to get out of town. Uh, by that time, you know, uh, you know, mom and my dad, my stepmom and stepdad, they would have had to work a little extra, but I did have the means to go to college at that time. But I was done, and I was like, there's a bigger world out there. I grew up in a very rural uh, part of Tennessee, 5,000 people, small. My high school graduating class was 90 some odd kids. So I was like, there's more out there. So I actually joined when I was 17. My parents had to sign. I was in delayed entry, and that was in 2000. And it was a culture shock, bro. It was a culture shock. I just remember, they don't tell you that you can. I know you're an Army vet, man, and I don't know how they do it, but in the Marine Corps, man, they don't tell you that you can refuse to get off the bus. Like when you get to boot camp. Um, I didn't know that was a thing. So I'm 17 years old, man, and this giant human being, this drill instructor, that Marine Corps drill instructor voice that they all use that I can't replicate. Uh, he yells at everybody to get off his bus right now. And dude, there was a kid. When I say kid, I mean, he was a young man. He's older than I am. I'm a child. I'm 17 years old. And this other dude, stone faced, does not get off the bus. And I remember looking at him like, is he allowed to not get off the fucking bus? and he was a yoked dude.
Yeah.
He was a yoked guy. And I was like, bro, if this guy's not willing to get off the bus, I'm never going to make it. But I did. I made it. And I was a comms guy. I always tell everybody I was a pogue. I was personnel other than a grunt. I don't hide that. Comm dudes were the redheaded stepchildren. Everybody hates us when stuff doesn't work.
You need those guys.
But yeah, man. I started out as a radio operator, and then I moved into satellite communications. And everything was going good, man. My first enlistment, I spent the majority of it in Okinawa, Japan, because it was supposed to only be a 1-year unaccompanied tour, but I got big into scuba diving, so I kept extending my year over there. And finally, they're like, Yeargan, bro, there's a war going on. You have to leave. And I'm like, all right. So in between that time, so I leave Okinawa, I go to jump school. Again, just something I always wanted to do. Didn't need it for my job. Unlike the Army, the Marine Corps, in order to go to jump school, it's got to be basically MOS specific.
Yeah.
I just happened that they had some extra slots, and I was like, what have I got to do? And they're like, you've got to join the Marine Corps for 4 more years. And I'm like, well, sign me up for that shit. And went to jump school, had a great time, checked into Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to 2nd Marine Division. And my career was going great, man. Early promotes, letters of commendation, letters of recommendation, everything was going Gucci. My first deployment was to Fallujah. Everybody knows all the craziness that was the Battle of Fallujah. I want to say that I was, for the most part, other than convoy ops, I was pretty far removed from that stuff. No war stories there, really. I mean, a lot of rockets, a lot of IEDs,
Sure.
but no real direct contact other than one time. And everybody hates on me because I was a radio operator and I wound up with a combat action ribbon. And I have infantry friends that don't have one.
Oh, no.
And they get some kind of way, man.
No, they do.
But I'm always like, man, I'm sorry, man. I was, depending on how you look at it, I was either at the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time, dude.
Yeah.
And I just scooped that up. But my second deployment was to Ramadi, and it was pretty rough. A little more direct action stuff there as part of a quick reaction force, a QRF, and then as some forward communication detachments. Did great. Came home from Ramadi, got ahead of my skis a little bit, started partying. I always like to say that I was a great Marine when it came to doing Marine Corps things, being in the field, being on deployment, being in garrison. I'm like, I don't understand the need for some of these rules and regulations. So by that time, I was partying really hard. I was drinking a lot. some of those drinks would lead me down some pretty crazy rabbit holes, and I was just kind of out of my. If I'm going to be honest with you, bro, I was just out of my mind, man. I was partying left and right. I was making horrible decisions.
Sure.
That led to a NJP, Article 32, for failure to obey a rule and regulation, because I was thinking with the wrong part of my body, and it was all liquored up, and made some horrible decisions.
Sure.
And then I was like, what am I going to do? I was like, my whole identity at that time was the Marine Corps. And I loved it. I loved everything
So
about
you
it.
planned on staying in for 20?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Oh, yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. Like, and I already kind of had it set up in my mind, like the ladder I was going to take, the different careers I was going to take. But something kind of clicked in me. I will say this, because I've seen it with colleagues and other service members as well. Post NJP, my command didn't treat me like shit. They helped me keep my head on straight, and I was kind of able to overcome it.
Sure.
I knew the best thing to do was like, I got to get out of here. So I volunteered to go back to Iraq. So I went back to Iraq 2 more times. I got re-promoted. Everything was great, but I knew at that time I was coming up on 8 years, and I knew I had this NJP on my record, and I was like, I could re-enlist, but I don't think I'll pick up staff sergeant. I don't think I'll pick up E6 with this NJP on my record. And if I do, I'll just be terminal, right? So even though I had a good re-enlistment code, just living with that NJP hanging over my head, like I say, even though in a way I felt like I was able to overcome it, but I was like, I'm never going to be able to retire from the Marine Corps. So what I do now. And there's this thing in the military community. In a way, it's kind of silly when you think about it, but there's a lot of transition from the military to law enforcement, right? After being in law enforcement, I can tell you that other than the uniformity and the rules, regulations, and the institutionalization, like, it's really not the best thing to transition into, really. But I was like, I'll go be a cop. But before that, I was an EMT for a couple of years, because honestly, bro, and I know, don't tell Mike, but I wanted to be a firefighter.
Okay.
Right. I wanted to be a firefighter. So I went and got my EMT certification. I was like, be a firefighter, man. Because there's no cop calendars, you know what I'm saying? And firefighters don't go out looking for fires, right? They just call you when they need you.
Right.
So I was like, I'll go be a firefighter. Well, our fire department wasn't hiring, but I had some family in law enforcement, and they were hiring pretty heavily at the time. So I got hired on at the sheriff's office here in Chattanooga. It's called the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. And I started out in corrections in the jail. Loved it. As weird as that sounds, man, if you want an education in sociology, work in corrections. You can learn so much more than you can ever learn in a textbook.
Yeah, I after I got out, I got back from overseas, and I was like, I don't really know what's next for me, right? So I just took all the tests: corrections, fire, police. I really wanted to be a police officer, or at least I was convinced at that time that I wanted to be a police officer. But in my city, they have residency requirements, and at the time, I didn't meet the requirement. I hadn't been a resident in the city long enough to be selected for that position. So I was forced to withdraw and wait for the next exam. But in the meantime of withdrawing and then taking that next exam, I got into software sales, and kind of made me think twice about it and be like, yeah, maybe I don't want to be a cop. And man, I really think that everything works out the way it's supposed to, because not being a police officer is probably one of the best things that ever happened to me.
That's what I say. I think I found my niche now, and I would fathom to say that having been a police officer, it obviously helps. But if there's a way to get to where I am now without being a police officer first, in hindsight, I don't know that I would have been one. And I was one for about 8 years. So after corrections, I put in to transfer to patrol, and I got selected for it. And I was one of those guys that would just turn and burn, man. Like, worked all the overtime I could. I wanted to work the roughest part of towns. I wanted to, you know, find the most bad guys. And, looking back on it now, man, it's some leftover adrenaline stuff for some unfinished business I have from the Marine Corps.
Hmm.
You know, I think I've often asked myself this a lot. It's like, and don't get me wrong, I love police. We need police. I'm pro police to the bone. But I've often thought about, in the micro sense, am I making a difference? Sure I am. Sure I am. And some of those differences I made in the people that I got to help, I'll remember those to the day I die. But sometimes in the macro sense, you're like, am I really putting a dent in anything? And that's something, that I struggled with. But then a lot of those chasing that adrenaline high.
Hmm.
I started drinking again, and it was pretty bad when, you know, I was a DUI at one point in my career. I was a DUI and field sobriety instructor, and I can remember, if I'm going to be honest, training people to look for drunk drivers when I'm standing right beside you, halfway in the back. Right? It was a form of escapism.
Yeah.
I think um, there was
So you would
there was a
teach
lot of
that
unfinished.
course, be like, you were a DUI and field sobriety instructor, if you will, and then like you would do that while you had been drinking.
Mhm.
Interesting. No,
I would.
believe me, no judgment over here, not
I'm
for a single thing. I'm just
not
making sure I
actively drinking.
understand. What's that?
But yeah, not actively drinking. Like I'm not
Right.
in the class
Yeah.
with a cocktail in my hand.
No, but it's
But yeah, man,
it's it's it just speaks to the power of addiction more than anything, right? I mean, you're
hundred
teaching these
percent.
things that you truly believe in, but here you are living kind of against those values. And I think we've all done that.
100%.
We've all done that where we've, gone against our core belief system and been like, wait a second, I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite here. And, is that kind of how you felt?
It was to the point where you know, my colleagues would be like, Yeargan, bro, you good? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm good. And I was still showing up, making great quality arrest, taking guns and dope off the street. So, I'm still producing.
Yeah.
So as long as it didn't show up at work, what I was doing outside of work, I could be totally off the rails. Right.
Yeah.
And then I had one supervisor, I had one close call, and he was like, are you drinking on duty? And I was like, no, which was not a lie. I was not drinking on duty, but I had been drinking close enough prior to duty that I probably had alcohol in my system if I were to take a field sobriety test.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, it kind of clicked in my head. I'm like, oh, he's watching me. Right.
Yeah.
And you would have thought that would have been enough to try to go get some help, but it wasn't.
Hmm.
It wasn't. It took a day. I was I blacked out. It's the only blackout I've ever had. And I don't remember anything from that day other than waking up and my wife being extremely mad at me and just looking heartbroken. And I was like, I don't know what I said or did, but I know that if I want to, uh, you know, keep my family intact, then I need to do something. So I was actually supposed to go to work that day,
Yeah.
and I checked myself into the VA instead. I called the sheriff's office, and they put me on medical leave. And I checked myself into the VA in Nashville, uh, which was a trip because you get in and you're locked in there, bro. You're locked in there. Like, it's voluntary,
Hmm.
right? I wasn't on paper or anything like that. But once you voluntarily get in there, they lock the door behind you. And it stays voluntary
Interesting.
as long as you continue the program. But the minute you're like, I want to leave, well, then that's when they're like, then it becomes a paper issue and a legal issue. Right.
Really?
And obviously I don't I don't need that in my life.
Okay.
So
So was
I
this like a rehab facility
it
with the
was
VA?
the I was there for about 10 days.
Okay.
The first 3 to 4 days was straight up detox. And let me tell you something, man. Um, I thought I was dying. I thought I was dying.
You were
I was
drinking that
so
much.
addicted.
And
Correct.
was it just alcohol?
It was.
Okay.
It was just I had tried some other things in the
Yeah,
past,
sure.
but nothing really took,
Yep.
which I'm
That's
glad.
good. Yeah.
But alcohol was my jam.
Sure.
Um, and I was so dependent on it
Hmm.
that I had to be medically detoxed.
Wow.
I had to be given medicine and detoxed under a doctor's care,
Hmm.
basically in a hospital bed. Um, that took 3 or 4 days. But the first 2 days, I literally thought I was dying. Like I was seeing, it
Yeah.
was crazy, bro. I was seeing things. It was disgusting.
Yeah, man. That's
Um,
crazy to me because like I've had my issues with alcohol like in an insane capacity where I've never had it in the sense of where it was like a physical dependency, but I've gotten to the point where or I had been to the point where it was a coping mechanism. Like I'm going to use alcohol to run from my problems because if I drink just enough, I'm not going to feel anything or I'm going to be able to run
well,
from the things that I'm feeling, right?
that's how it started. I was masking all the bullshit from the
Yeah.
military. I was masking a lot of stuff. I was self medicating,
Hmm.
and then it just became a full blown addiction, and it was gnarly.
Mm.
And then after that, then it I stayed there for another 5 or 6 days, um, and it was more basically counseling. And honestly, that's kind of when I had an epiphany. I was like, alcohol's not really my problem. I was like, there's some depression there. There's some post traumatic stress there. Um, there's some, even working around education, we call it ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. I said there's stuff from childhood there.
Sure.
There's all this stuff there, bro. But once I dealt with that, it wasn't hard to stop drinking.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. And
that was what blew my
And
mind.
that's the stuff
Like
I learned as
once,
well, right? It's the alcohol is just a component of it, right? It's those other mental things that are driving you towards the alcohol. It's not, like I can never drink again. I'll be just fine. Like I've never been, even when I was drinking for months and months at a time, 8 months at a time, it was never that I needed the drink. It was these other feelings, these other things that I was trying to avoid. The PTSD, the
yeah,
depression, the being angry with myself, the not, the hating myself, all that shit. It wasn't the alcohol. I never had like that physical dependency. It was just how do I uh how do I push these feelings aside so I don't have to think about it? Right.
yeah,
And now, like I'm not a sober person by any means. Like I mean, I just very rarely drink. So I drink,
hmm
once, twice a month, and I never have more than just two or three. Three's a lot.
yeah,
No, three's a lot. Usually it's one or two. Um,
hmm
but I think that it's not the alcohol. It's those underlying factors that that push you in that direction of needing to uh, you know hide or shield your feelings and emotions and deal with those things that you really should be dealing with and hitting head on.
100%. Because once I was medically detoxed. Like once physically my body no longer relied on alcohol, then I was able to deal with all the underlying stuff. And then once
Yeah.
I did that, I was like, I don't even really want to drink.
Yeah.
Like I'm not opposed to it. Obviously, I work at a Catholic school. I'm Catholic. I'm not morally opposed to it whatsoever. But I'm like, it's just not really my thing,
So do
man.
you
I
drink
mean, good on
now
you if it
at
is.
all?
No,
Cool.
no. It's. I'm not saying I never will, you know, but what I have kind of told myself is if it's if it's something that will enrich the experience or enrich the moment, like have a glass of wine at dinner
Yeah.
or something like that, I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. But the minute I'm like, hey, I'm stressed, so I want to have a drink, I'll never do that again.
That's the trigger, right? Like I need
Hmm
alcohol because I'm going through this.
hmm
That's that being able to identify that is powerful because it's a differentiator when it comes to addiction, right? So that's good that because I'm like that, right? If I'm like, hey man, I had a rough week, man, I could use a drink. That's a problem, right? Because now we're drinking because of some external factor, not is like in at like a wedding or a dinner or a birthday
Right.
party or something this happy celebratory like type of experience.
Mhm.
It's that negative experience that's driving us towards uh that substance, whatever it is, that's going to alter ultimately your mind state, which it's awesome
Right.
that you can identify that now as somebody who struggled with it. And so that's cool, man.
Yeah. But it's 2018. 2018 was my last drink.
Wow. Yeah, man. No reason to ever go back, in my opinion, but do what you got to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, man. So, but even with that, I kind of came back to the sheriff's office with like renewed vigor.
Sure.
Uh, and I stayed there for 2, 3 more years. But I moved from patrol to school resource.
Yep.
It's called the Youth and Community Services Division, I think, but it's basically your school resource officer. And I fell in love with it.
That's awesome.
Absolutely fell in love with it. And what's weird is I always wound up at like schools that you wouldn't think I'd be a good fit. Like I wound up at a bunch of inner city schools, um, or like alternative schools or something like that,
Yeah.
you know. And I loved it. I loved it. I still keep in touch with a lot of those kids are adults today, and
Yeah.
I still keep up with them.
Now, now, is it fair to say, just so I understand what you're into now, is it fair to say that you do mostly or the beef of your job is, kind of preparing kids for like maybe those active shooter situations? Is it mostly that?
That's a component.
Gotcha.
That's a component. So 3 years at the remaining 3 years at the sheriff's office was as a school resource officer. Then
So does every school have that
there,
down south?
yes,
Okay. Okay.
yes, yes. Then there was a push. Well,
Or
let me
most
take a
schools?
step back. Most schools do.
Gotcha.
Most middle schools and high schools do.
Mhm.
But there was a push to have them in elementary schools. Well, the sheriff's office didn't have enough school resource officers, couldn't hire enough fast enough to fill up the elementary schools. So the school district here, they actually started their own school safety officer division. So I went from the sheriff's office as a school resource officer to the school district as a school safety officer, um, but basically doing the same thing. One's law enforcement minded, one's security minded, but there's a lot of overlap.
Gotcha.
Um, and that's what I was doing until last year, 2 years ago. Last year, um, there was, I don't know if you remember, but there was a pretty tragic, well-known school shooting in Tennessee and Nashville at a private school.
Yes. That was like
Yes,
2 years ago,
and
3 years ago.
two, I think,
Yeah, I remember that.
and yeah, two, because this is my third school year here. That's what prompted me to come here. Was my kids go to school where I work now, and they had no school safety or school security. They had no armed security or SSO, no school safety officer. And they asked for a meeting with me. And I always kind of tell this joke, but it's not a joke. I mean, it's the way it happened. But I was surprised that they asked me because I had been that mean parent who had been in the office about why do you leave all these doors propped wide open, right? Um, so they called me. They reached out and they asked if they would if I could take a meeting with them, and I did. And if you don't know how it works in Catholic education, there's always a priest somewhere that controls the money, right? Okay, um, and we're in this meeting, and I'm actually telling him that a more cost effective option for the school and the church is to hire a contract security company. I said, they're not all made the same. I said, but there's one that I would definitely recommend. Um, and he just looks at me and he was like, yeah, Aaron, but I want you to do it. Well, I happen to be Catholic. So, and as we've said, I've done a few things in my life, so I'm still trying to make it to heaven. So I was like, I couldn't say no. Um, so how they do it in private school world is you take a vast pay cut, but they give you a fancy title. So I took a pay cut, but I became the school safety coordinator instead of the school safety officer.
Mm.
And they give you business cards. That's how you know you've made
Oh
it, man.
yeah,
When you get business
that's
cards.
huge.
I'm not giving one out to. I'm not giving one out to anybody, but I've got a whole stack, man. If you want
Oh,
one,
I'd
dog, I'll
love
give
one.
you one. Yeah, and but I say all that to say, man, I get to protect my own
That's
kids,
cool.
and that's what's up. But I've been able taking a school that had no school safety officer or school safety program in the past and build one from scratch
Mhm.
has been awesome. I mean, we've had some struggles on the budget front, but everything that I saw in the past where I'm like, they should do this, or they should not do that, or they should keep doing this, I'm able to make that policy here.
Yeah. I went to Catholic school for a little bit, a couple years in middle school, and I can
Do
remember.
they have nuns?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and I can remember just like they're always scraping just to get by, right? Like there's no money at these schools, so the fact that they prioritize that, and essentially, I would imagine they had to create budget for that. So
They
it's pretty cool
they
that they
did.
did that. They prioritized it, created some budget, and like kind of saw the necessity in your work. So and then
Right. And I will
tapped you to
forever
do
be
it.
grateful
Yeah,
for them doing that, because you're right. I don't think a lot of people understand that, you know, th- we have a shoestring thin budget, especially compared to other private schools.
yeah,
Um, so the fact that they found the funds to do that, which meant a lot of private donors and a lot of parents that maybe couldn't give as much as they'd like to, still gave to budget this program. And I'll forever be grateful for that.
yeah.
Um, but going back to active shooter, that is something that we do obviously implement here. But I I do that in addition to school safety. I'm also a security and self defense trainer, and kind of my niche is school specific security. So I do travel around giving those classes to other schools.
Nice, nice, man. That's cool. It sounds like you've been through it a little bit, right? And now you get to do something that's pretty rewarding. I would imagine that's a pretty rewarding job to um not only just do that type of work, but to do that type of work in the school where your kids are. um
It is,
that's
man.
pretty sweet. I like that.
It it's great, but the journey kind of continues, because I think maybe this is how I found you guys when we first started corresponding. Was I knew what needed to be done. I even knew internally what I needed to do, and I still wasn't doing it right. Like, I always tell people that, for lack of better terms, um, the new security upgrades at our school, the tinted windows, I caught my reflection at work one day, and I was like, I look like hot garbage, right? Because officer presence is a thing. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that bad guys know who they can try. You have to look the part. And I was like, man, I look like hot garbage, man.
Yeah,
And the grind was still getting to me. I wasn't wanting to drink again, but I wasn't following the habits that I knew would make me successful, which means I wasn't giving my all to the students and staff here.
yeah,
Um, and I knew I wanted to make a change, but then I just kind of sat on it. I didn't know how to do it. And then that's when I found, like we talked about, that's when I found Taylor Kavanaugh.
hmm
And uh, I reached out to him. And what attracted me to him was really because, you know, he'd went through some struggles in his personal life and his military career. And I was like, oh, not every former Navy SEAL or former special operations guy that's out here is perfect, right?
right.
Like,
I'd argue that most
so
of them are not perfect.
correct. Correct. And what I will always give Taylor is, like, he'll tell you that.
Yeah,
So I reached out to him. I was like, hey, bro, like, can we talk? And I got on his program, and it really helped me with mindset. It because it was a lot of the stuff that I already knew that I needed to do, especially coming from military and from law enforcement. It's like I already know what to do. I just
Mhm.
need someone to make sure that I do it,
Yeah.
and he did that. And I was able to get back in shape, and then that kind of flipped to where continuing with the school safety thing. But in addition to that, what I kind of feel like my calling is, I guess if you want to say it like that, my purpose is people that come from like our background. You know, if you're looking like I looked 8 months ago, and you want to get back to your old self
Mhm.
in that mindset that you need to basically attack the day, right? Like I want to help people, especially men, do those things. So any veteran, any military person, any first responder of any stripe, like I want to help them do that because I'm 10 times better. I'm more keyed in. I mean, I'm 42 years old now and I'm doing stuff that physically that I was doing in my 20s when I was on active duty,
Right.
right? But I've taken it a step further because by doing this stuff for myself, when it comes to school safety, I realized how many school safety officers and school resource officers look like hot garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And it's incredible to me how, how many police officers look out of shape. And if you pay attention to the things that I say, I'm hard on, police officers and firefighters and that entire service community because, you have an obligation to be in shape. And as prior service members, which a lot of people in the law enforcement community are, you've been taught these habits. You've been taught the things that will, if you take them and, apply them outside of the military and into your civilian world, you know, your results in the civilian world are going to be really, really good. You just have to have those disciplines, those habits, all of the things that I talk about on this podcast all the time and holding yourself accountable and making sure that you're keeping those contracts with yourself. So, it upsets me a lot when I see, people within our community as veterans not really upholding that standard because, I mean, let's be honest, you know better. You've been taught and you've done it.
you know better.
And, it's one thing to, transition out of the military and make that, mental mind shift into maybe a softer person. But, I think you have a responsibility to yourself and to the people that rely on you to maintain that capability of protecting what's yours.
100%. Like the way I see it, and actually, I'm trying to gather data on it because I've been looking at the research in some of my other security training about the physiological response your body has when you're involved in a critical incident. So I'm telling people, I'm like, man, you have to have a certain amount of tactical fitness
Mhm.
and you have to have a certain amount of physical fitness. And the way I say it is theoretically, I may have to sprint across campus and engage a deadly threat. I have to have physical fitness and tactical fitness to do those two things successfully, right? But then when you look around at some of these, whether they're law enforcement officers or security professionals, a lot of people don't realize, and I don't know how it is where you live, but here I'm confident when I say this. Unless you're in a special operations unit or a SWAT team member, that physical fitness test that you take to become a cop is the last one you
Yep.
take. And I don't think civilians realize that.
They don't. But they
In
should
private
because
security
you
world,
see half
bro,
the cops out there just out of shape.
100%.
And
And in
it's
private security world, bro, it's even worse.
yeah.
It's even worse. So to help combat that and to show the parents and the staff, like I'm in it to win it, I will protect your children. Um, I implemented a physical fitness test for myself. And if we ever hire any additional SSOs, they'll have to pass it as well. Nothing crazy, right?
Yeah,
But
but I mean, I talked about this. We
bro,
had Jason Kalipa on the show.
pushback from it, bro. It ruffled some feathers in the community. In the security community, I got some pushback from some
Oh,
folks.
did you? Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
not
man.
shocking. Like we talked about this, about a month ago with Jason Kalipa, and it's, you know, being in shape is one thing, but you got to be able to perform and you got to be able to shoot and you got to be able to, apprehend a suspect. And, it's shoot, move, and communicate. All the things we were taught in the military. You got to be able to do them all and in conjunction with one another. So, you know, it's not just, and even it's just to piggyback off of that, staying in some kind of shape is like playing with your kids, chasing them around and going up and down steps and, just all these basic
Man,
things that, a lot of guys, even, people from our community that, they find these things, these simple tasks to be pretty difficult. And that's sad.
bro, I had a talk with a group of men the other day because I always frame it like this. Um, I'm like, no, you got to be from the church of what's happening now. Like, nobody cares what you used to do. Nobody cares I used to be a Marine. Nobody cares I used to be a cop. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that you won the state football championship in 1997. Nobody gives a shit, right? Nobody
It's true.
cares. So I get tired when I hear guys be like, because it's mostly guys. So I have a lot of female clients and they seem to get it, but a lot of male clients are like, "Look, I know what I do. If it went down, I know what I do." No, you don't, man.
Mhm.
You're 20 years and 20 pounds past your prime, and you haven't trained since then. You haven't put yourself under any kind of stress inoculation, right? I made a joke about it. I'm like, there could be, and I'm not hating because I used to be one of those dudes.
Yeah.
I'll make it clear. I used to be one of the guys. But it's like some of you guys out here see me walking around and you're like, I could whoop that dude's ass. No, you couldn't because you get winded going up flights of stairs and picking up your children from school. So no, you couldn't.
Hmm.
Right. So when I implemented this fitness test at St. Jude, I'm sure there are others, but the only one that I could find other than St. Jude that has an ongoing fitness standard for their school safety officers is a Jewish day school in Michigan. And that brings up the point that I always tell people: there's security and there's the illusion of security. They're not the same thing. As the security professional, you have to ask yourself, which one are you providing? And as a client, you have to ask yourself, which one are you paying for? But I want to make ongoing physical fitness standards kind of mainstream in the security community, especially when it comes to school security and school safety.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, parents get it, staff gets it, some other security professionals don't get it. But I'm like, that's the security versus the illusion of security argument.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of like anything else, right? I mean, you look at just a regular guy and, your own capabilities, whether it's at work, whether it's your fitness, whether it's this, are you actually capable of these things? Or is there the illusion in your head that you think you're capable of these things? You think you'll perform in this type of a manner, but you haven't really put in the work to make sure you'll do that. And that's kind of
Exactly.
the thing that, we talk a lot about here is, you know, following through and executing on the things that you say you're going to do and setting those standards. If you're meeting the standards or exceeding the standards that you set for yourself and you're executing, and then lastly holding yourself accountable, I mean, you're going to get what you pay for, right? You're going to get what you put
100%.
out, and that's what your return on your investment is going to look like. So,
And kids know, man. The one thing that's been really heartening is I like to, I like to challenge the students to like physical stuff, physical
yeah, I
little
see the kids and
competitions.
stuff
And
doing push-ups and stuff.
yeah, bro, I'll randomly blame, somebody on this campus will plank every day.
Oh, that's awesome.
Somebody. But I'm like, man, when I tell adults, I'm like, your kids watch you. Your kids watch what you do
Yeah.
more than we ever give them credit for. And I don't care what your vocation is in life, man. I don't care if you're a stay-at-home parent, if you're a school teacher, if you're a cop, if you work in a factory, if you work in retail sales. I don't care what it is, man. Right now, more than ever, you should expect to self-rescue.
Mm.
It's just the nature of society today.
Yeah. And I love that attitude, right? That attitude of and that's something that we can control. So that's one of the things I like to talk about a lot, especially like when I just started these speaking engagements. So when I speak, I love to talk about attitude because it's the main thing that you can control, right? It's, doing the things that like you can just sit there and like feel sorry for yourself. You can wake up, you can be in a bad mood for no reason, right? But can you be in a good mood for no reason? Like that's the hard part. And
Yeah.
identifying that and maintaining a positive attitude is just so important. And it seems like you got that.
Well, it starts with my daily habits, man. I mean, it really
Yeah.
does. I I've done it enough to where even if I'm not feeling well, it's just part of my process. I wake up early, I journal, I visualize, I just stay alone in my head for a while. Then I knock out a quick body circuit workout. Then I start my day.
Nice.
Um, and then obviously I fit in a certain number of weeks. I'll hit up the gym and do cardio as well. I'm a huge fan of rucking, which you need to be the standard ruck patches.
Oh, I do. I do. Actually, you know what? I
Yeah,
was looking into those and they're super inexpensive to get. So I think I'm going to start getting them.
bro.
Yeah.
I'll be your first
I
customer,
know you will.
right?
I know you will. I love it.
Boom.
I love it.
But yeah, man. It's I don't know. I said it the other day. No matter what side of whatever argument you fall on, if you think there needs to be some kind of crazy change in the world, you will never accomplish that if you don't change yourself
Hmm.
first. If you don't come correct to yourself, you're not whatever grand plan you
Yeah.
have or whatever you think needs to happen in the world, man. It's not. You've got to get correct with yourself,
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think the biggest hurdle to that is people don't like to have that difficult conversation with themselves. They don't like to say,
bro.
shit, I don't work out enough. I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good father. I'm not a good employee. I'm not putting in the effort, in whatever space that I need to be or whatever capacity I need to be. And so it's easier to just either fake it or it's easier to just completely deny it and push the blame and shift it elsewhere.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
think.
paramount is, making sure that you're right with yourself and doing the things that you're supposed to be doing in accordance to the
Well,
standards that you've set for yourself.
correct. David Goggins talks about his accountability mirror,
Yeah.
and that was almost legitimately what I had. I saw a reflection of myself in a mirrored window, and I was like, I'm not saving anybody, man.
Hmm.
I'm not stopping anybody. I was like, this is not
Yeah.
me. And then that started the kind of the process of getting right.
Hmm.
I just needed some help doing it. And, like I said, Taylor helped a lot. But that's kind of what I want to do for other people, but especially in the, military, law enforcement, first responder community. Because we really, I mean, whether you like us or not, I mean, to be honest with you, I perform armed security on this campus, and to see somebody armed on this campus, it some people it still takes them aback,
Hmm.
right? But I'm like, nonetheless,
Listen, man, if your kids can watch movies and all this other shit with guns and whatever, then they can see a good guy walking around with a gun, knowing that they're there to protect them. I mean,
hundred
let's stop it.
percent,
That
yeah,
that's my own
100,
personal view,
yeah.
but and I don't like to
No,
tell anybody anything, but that's just
I agree with you, brother. I'm right there too. But what I was thinking is like, you know, I have to be the person, whether you like me to be being here or not, doesn't negate the fact that I need to be here. And I think I'm right where I need to be, but I'm like, I have to be able to do this thing if I ever need to do this thing. And so that started with me getting my habits
yeah.
right again.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be, I like to say capable. You can't be capable if you haven't put in the work and done the training physically, mentally, with your firearms. I have no reason to ever be a great shot, I don't think, but I still shoot. I still stay in shape. I'm still, make sure I can move appropriately if necessary and protect myself if necessary, physically and all of those things. And it's about being prepared more than it is just you know a necessity, if you
100%,
will,
man.
right? Depending on what it
And
is you do with your everyday life.
like I said, now more than ever, I always advise people. I'm like, cops aren't always coming anymore, right?
Sure.
There's huge staffing shortages. Um, Now, due to the need for more officers nationwide, they're lowering hiring standards. So not only are cops not always coming, now, unfortunately, sometimes the cops that are coming are not the cops you want, right? So I don't care what you do in life.
Hmm.
Everybody needs to be proficient with a firearm. If that's just not your thing for whatever reason, You need to be proficient with some kind of less than lethal technology. Everybody needs to be proficient with some kind of unarmed self-defense. Everybody needs CPR, AED, first aid, and everybody needs to stop the bleed. I don't care what you do in life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are all valuable techniques, or just like skill sets to have. Right. You know, I still think back to like some of the training I had in the military about, patching up a gunshot wound and like just whatever. I could still do those things today if I had to. I still have a tourniquet in my shooting bag when I go shoot, right? Just, you never know, somebody actually accidentally gets shot or something. Who knows? But again, just being
And
prepared.
we've taught our entire when I came on board, um, our my goal was to start a CPR and stop the bleed program free of charge to get all the staff and any of the students that wanted it certified. And the numbers right now between CPR, both CPR and stop the bleed, we've certified about 40 people to include students. So, you know, it's the culture I'm trying to build
Nice.
here.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I had a great time talking to you. Finally got a chance to meet, face to face, if you will. Uh, but I really appreciate, most importantly, I appreciate your support for us, right? I've had so many people, and this isn't a brag in any capacity, but I've had a lot of people reach out to come on the podcast, and um, I bumped you way up just because I really appreciate all the
Well, I
support
appreciate
you've
you,
given
man.
us. You like our stuff, you share our stuff, you rock the brand, and that means so much to me. And I think I've told you that in private as well, but I just want to say it publicly. And so when you
Bro, you're
reached
very
out,
welcome.
if there was anything I could do to help, get your story out there and your message, because I do think it's a good one. I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to help in any possible way that I can, because you've been just so great to us. So just thank you for that.
Thank you, man. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And you guys are doing, like I said the other day, I was like, bro, you guys are doing the Lord's work. Like, don't stop. 100%, man. I know for a fact, bro, that there are people that were in a bad way mentally until they found your Mike stuff. So that's what's up.
I appreciate that, and that's what all of this is about. So, thank you for that, and we'll stay in touch. We'll be in touch. Again, I'll be out that way next week. If you think you can make the trip out there, I got all day Sunday free. So
Sweet.
just let me know, man. If you're around, it'd be cool to catch up, cool to connect in person. So just let me know.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, man. I will talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Take care, guys.